I'm going to start with you, Governor, to talk about overall transportation funding. You were successful this year with the General Assembly to actually get $1.8 billion dedicated to additional transportation funding, but as we know, statewide, we have a lot of mountain passes and a lot of snow removal and all of those things, but in terms of looking at the overall comprehensive transportation policy of the state, what do you think our challenges are and what are the next steps?
Well, certainly $1.8 billion came through something called the hospital provider fee, which I won't bore you with, but it's a fraction, it's less than a fifth by any measure of what we really need, and that's not a wish list, that's what we really look at. And as I said, it's a competitive world out there. Utah has almost half our population, they may be 60% of our population, and yet they're spending 3 to 4 times every time, 3 or 4 times what we're spending on the expansion of transportation infrastructure. Provo to Ogden is a little shorter than Fort Collins to Colorado Springs, but Provo to Ogden is 6 lanes the whole way and 8 lanes for, I think when I looked at the map, rough justice, about half of it is 8 lanes. We don't even have 6 lanes all the way between Fort Collins and Colorado Springs, and we've got double the population. We are woefully behind, and over a period of years, that will eventually catch up to us. So I look at, and I think I've talked to the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, I think we're all recognizing that this year we're going to have to figure out what is the right source of new revenue. And part of the job on behalf of the state is to go out and say, and we're going to cut every corner we can in terms of our ongoing, how we do business in the Department of Transportation, in every state agency, to demonstrate to the voters, in Colorado, we can't get new money without the voters approving it. So we've really got to prove to them that A, we're being as frugal as we can with what we have, and B, here's where our commitment to you. If we pass this initiative, here's where that new money is going to go to. And I think that's what we essentially do with fast tracks, and that's what we're going to have to do on a statewide initiative.
So Dave, what's the next steps for RTD? I know that there was for a while some talk about next tracks. We obviously still have to finish our system that we promised the voters in 2004, but what do you see the challenges now that you've got a much more robust system that you're operating? What are the true challenges facing RTD, and how are you getting ready for that?
Thank you, Maria. Well, there's a variety of challenges, as you might well imagine, but really the number one challenge is funding, transportation funding, and whether that's the funding to complete the capital projects that we have left with Fast Tracks. We still have 4 projects left to complete of the Fast Tracks program where we haven't identified either the capital funding for and also the operation and maintenance funding for. And those 4 projects for us to complete, we estimate we need about $2 billion just in capital alone to complete those 4 projects. But the situation we're in financially is we've been on a big build out, but we're kind of up against the wall in terms of being able to complete large capital projects. We're up against our debt capability, and we don't have the ability to do any more borrowing or any more bonding for a number of years. So funding is really the number one big piece. In addition to that, another very important thing is asset management and state of good repair. So as our system expands, our original system now is over 20 years old, and we're actually making wholesale replacements of pieces of track and some bridge sections and switch sections. So this is an incredibly important area across the nation. There's about $90 billion worth of assets just in the transit industry alone that are in a state of disrepair, meaning they're in backlog. And one of the big parts of my vision is that's not going to happen here. We're not going to let anything get into backlog in our system. So we're going to have a huge emphasis on maintaining this system in a state of good repair and not get behind the curve there. We're also very challenged with workforce. As you've heard some of the other panelists talk about the unemployment that we have in Colorado, workforce and human capital is one of our strategic goals, was for this year, and it is for next year. We have some robust programs as far as professional development, but we are struggling to hire bus and rail operators to the point where it's impacting our service a little bit. And then some of the other challenges is it's interesting, even though across the nation we're experiencing a bit of decline, particularly in bus ridership, not so much in rail, but in bus. But the need is still there. You've heard Christine and others say that there's a great demand and a great need for transit. And so, our challenge is how do we build out a transit system that provides the routing and the frequency that serves all of these locations and individuals. And then the last piece I'll talk about is we have, at the national level, we're talking a lot with our colleagues through APTA and other agencies about how does public transportation stay relevant in the times of changing technology that we have. So, we're critically interested in that. We're putting out requests for information right now we really want the private sector to talk to us about, what are the things that you want to do technology-wise? What are the things you can do? What are the things you're interested in providing services for, particularly mobility on demand and transportation as a service? Because we think that there's a lot of possibility there to leverage private sector services and create more efficiencies in our system and put those savings into the big fixed route kinds of things that we do best. So those are some of the things I think that are on the horizon for us.
Okay, thank you. Ms., one of the challenges that we've seen, and I think it's related to our growth in terms of transportation congestion, but that's manifested itself in some parts of our community throughout the Front Range as a backlash to growth. So there are some communities in the Front Range region who are actually on the ballot this year trying to do some curtailment and to do some growth management. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Tell us how the Chamber is playing a role with its Mobility Choice program, and how are you stepping in to try to not counter, but to some extent lead some more appropriate dialogue on the growth issue?
Sure. I'll start by saying this. You're all going to hear from my boss later in the week, Kelly Bruff. She tells everybody we have a board of 59 board members, all pretty much across the political spectrum. She says if you're ever having a bad day with your boss, you should give her a call. She has 59 to deal with. And they're extremely type A folks who care very much about the Denver metro region in this state. They're extremely committed to our growth and our success. And so they have looked at what are some of the top issues that we need to focus on as a chamber in order to continue our growth. And a few years ago, they identified 5 key issues. They identified our education system and making sure that we have the workforce we'll need in the future. And by the way, just to put it in perspective, Maria told you what the numbers were in the year 2000 and today. We're anticipating that in the next 20 years, we'll have roughly a 47% increase in population. We'll have so that brings us to about, I don't have the number, but 47%. So that we'll almost double in that time. We'll have about 5 million jobs in this area, and we'll need to move those folks efficiently throughout our area. And the governor spoke about growing our infrastructure. That is absolutely necessary. We know where there are huge pinch points, but we can't just grow ourselves and build lanes out of that problem. We know we have to think through a little bit more. The issues that the board raised were education, housing, transportation, water management, and then opening our primaries process for electing members, particularly to our state legislature, to make sure that folks that are registered as unaffiliated voters get to have a say, which in Colorado is the majority of our registered voters, or the largest segment of our registered voters, get to have a say in who goes to the November ballot, and that hopefully we can have more pragmatic thinkers at the legislature working with our executive office. So to focus on transportation, yes, we have been growing. We're thrilled that we've been growing. The negative side is that many communities are experiencing that pinch. And that turns into folks having to spend too much time in traffic, wasting time, really sitting in traffic, in roads that are probably worsening, and so paying more money to have their cars repaired, and that raises frustration. So the Chamber is working on 2 different things that we believe, and these are directives from our board, that we believe will get us to that future. and be successful. One is we are going to be working with the governor's office. We are going to be working with the legislature on bringing a ballot measure in front of Coloradans in 2018, hopefully to increase the sales tax, to fund transportation infrastructure, as well as a whole array of mobility type projects throughout the entire state of Colorado. Because again, as I said, we can't just build highways to fulfill the needs that we anticipate. We're also going to have to educate our communities and be creative. And so the second thing that we're doing just in the Denver metro region gets to those two pieces, the education and being more creative. We've created a nonprofit called Mobility Choice. And the Mobility Choice is a public-private partnership between the Regional Transportation District, our Colorado Department of Transportation, and the Denver Regional Council of Governments. And the private sector, both for-profits and nonprofit corporations. We've all pooled together $1.2 million to hire a consultant to develop a blueprint for our region. And the goal of the blueprint, what we hope will come out of it, is ways to be more innovative about how we spend in our public dollars. How to make sure that the spending is not siloed, and how to bring the private sector to collaborate more efficiently with the public sector. One of the concerns that we're seeing is we spend so much money building fast tracks and other major infrastructure projects for public transportation, yet private offerings like Lyft or like Uber and many, many others sometimes sort of leapfrog, help the public avoid having to use public transit. What we'd like to see, what we think will really take us into the future, is using technology to make it easier for perhaps the private sector to link with the public sector, and that way we can move more people more efficiently. And so that's the ultimate goal of Mobility Choice, and we're thrilled to be involved with it. And we, right now, we're about to hire a consultant to start doing the work, and I think it's what's really good for the region.
Christine, challenges in your world in the future, looking 10 years out?
Many. Well, first of all, I mean, we completely empathize with the challenges that RTD is facing in the state in terms of the cost of just maintaining our infrastructure, let alone finishing the build out that's necessary. At the same time, if we're going to attract businesses like Amazon and we're going to deal with all the people that are moving to the Denver metro region and get them to the jobs that all of our employers want them to get to, we've got to make sure that our transit system really works well for everyone. And right now, one of our great challenges is the affordability of light rail and bus fares. It's cheaper to use a car than it is to buy a round-trip bus pass or bus fare or a light rail ticket. There are people that would like to improve their educational situation by going to college. But if it costs them $8 round trip to get to the community college and back home, and they can't afford that, that is going to be detrimental to their ability to get the kind of skills that you've talked about in order to be ready and prepared to occupy those jobs. So our argument is that it's in everyone's best interest, the employers, the elected officials, the educational system, philanthropy, all of the residents, to make sure that the system works for everyone and that it's affordable. So I think that I really appreciate the partnership that we have with RTD, with the city, and with the state, and many other partners to try and figure this out. It is a complex challenge, but we would like to see an affordable bus and fare rate and pass system that addresses the needs of not only low-income and people of color, but also students and people with disabilities and older adults as well. I mean, right here in Denver, 36% of our population is spending more than 30% of their household income on housing. When you look at the average low-income household, 25% of them they are spending 25% of their household income on transportation. That's it's more than 50% of your household income that's either going to housing or transportation. That doesn't leave a whole lot else to go to college or to buy groceries or to pay for the things that your children need. The other thing to recognize is that even though there is a lot of job growth and a lot of those jobs are good and well-paying, 70% of the jobs that are going to be created in the Denver area by 2023 are going to pay less than $36,000 a year for those entry-level jobs. So a lot of people are not going to be making enough money to afford to live here and to afford transportation. This is an issue that affects all of us. And if we really want the Metro Denver area to be a great place for all, and I truly mean all of us, then we've got to work together to figure this stuff out. And it's not just transit. It's all of the policies that affect housing, and we have tremendous fiscal issues at the state level as well that we need to figure out. So this is going to take tremendous political will. And that's why one of the things that we're also really interested in is elected officials who understand these things and are willing to work hard, roll up their sleeves, and pass the kinds of policies that our state and our local areas need to get the job done. So that's one of them. I think that in terms of the work of the Denver Foundation, we are also really interested in the intra-city mobility. We have people living in the outskirts of town or moving to different areas to get to their jobs. So we can't just be thinking about this as a Denver issue. This is a regional issue, and how do we make sure that they can get to Lone Tree or to Boulder or to even Fort Collins and then have a way to get around once they're there. So Mile High Connects is really working on that issue, along with addressing the last mile situation. We can often get, this happens at the Denver Foundation. We have a lot of staff that are interested in using public transportation to get to work, but we're too far to walk from the nearest bus station to our building. And so how do you address those last mile issues? And then finally, we're also involved, Mile High Connects is involved in a really interesting partnership called the Strong, Prosperous, and Resilient Communities Challenge, or SPARK for short. And it is a partnership of philanthropy and nonprofit organizations and community members and others to really figure out the connection of transit with health and education and also climate change. And how do we bring community voice into that conversation so that we're really talking about these issues holistically and not in isolation. Because in all of the communities of all of you folks sitting in the audience, this is not a single issue. This is an issue that is tied to everything that we want to make our communities great. And we've got to really work together creatively to solve the problems. And I truly believe that they are solvable, but it's going to take money and it's going to take political will.
Thank you. Well, so Governor, I'm going to let you have the last word. I want you to, you've seen it all. You were mayor before Fast Tracks. You're now governor. You've had, 10 plus, 15, almost 16 years, right, on this. How do you, I know, you've seen it all from the beginning. So what is the last word for all of these individuals who are coming here to learn from us as to what they ought to take back in their communities, what we've done really well, and where we actually still have work to do?
And I guess I just would echo everything these guys said, because I think there you heard an intention, a commitment to collaboration that can't be matched. And I spent all those years as a capitalist out in the world of business. And if you're in business, the dream obviously is to have a monopoly for even just for a few years of any market, right? And that's why there are laws against it. It's so powerful. There are no laws against communities working together. There are no laws against a powerful private foundation working with the, the Regional Transportation Authority, working with the Chamber of Commerce, and bringing those elements together in one very focused initiative that says, all right, here's what we're going to do in the next 3 years, or here's what we're going to do in the next 20 years. And the fact that so often we get broken, I see this in metropolitan areas all over the country, so often we get broken and divided, and there become these, these feuds that are so counterproductive. It is so much more, the way we got all those 34 mayors to support fast tracks back in the beginning was to continually, with real numbers, show them that even if their section wasn't going to get quite as much attention, maybe they wouldn't even have a light rail stop anywhere in their municipality, that their citizens would save so much time in their commuting that the investment of their sales tax was still a huge bargain, just a huge magnet. I mean, it worked out to a little over a penny a minute for people in every single community in the metropolitan area. And I think that collaboration that we hear today here. Anyway, that collaboration which we're hearing now is so powerful, and there's literally nothing like it to get these big, infrastructure issues done. And indeed, without it, we are doomed to failure. So I love hearing it here. I think Colorado gets to be a model for everywhere else, and you begin to see it all over the country. So anyway, that initiative, that collaboration is the final word.
Thank you.